Muy bien. ¿Y tú? And you? How are you today? Alright, let us begin the party. I have to grab TikTok. We'll get TikTok on the line. And we are going to talk science because I have been working my butt off for the last... since 8 o'clock last night. Getting this science stuff done, and it came out phenomenal. Very excited about it. And I put together some really powerful graphics for the kids. And that's what it's all about. So, all right, let's go. Ooh, the people did not like my TikTok this morning. All right. The watch time on the metrics must have been horrific on it. Interesting. All right. Well, you know, some videos you put out and they get 100,000 views, and other videos you put out and they get 100. That's the way the cookie crumbles. All right. That is the way the cookie crumbles. All right, let's go live wired. I guess the people didn't find me to be interesting today. All right. It is what it is. All right, let's go. Let's go science. Do we want to call it science as a method? Do we want to call it... Let's call it homeschool science. Let's switch it up. Homeschool science. All right. All right, I have my phones ready to go. Up, this stand literally just broke. Now my hand broke. Ow. All right. We will survive. We will survive the winter. We're men around here. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, TikTok. It is a beautiful day here in the sunny but very rainy South. We woke up this morning. See, most people say, oh, I hope it doesn't rain. My wife looked at me, my beautiful wife, and she said, honey, I hope it rains because then we won't have to water the plants. And our prayers have been answered because it is a beautiful rainy day, and I absolutely love it. And speaking of beautiful days, I have been up the last X number of hours, grinding hard, putting together science experiments as always. And today, we are going to talk about the proper way to teach our children science, because the way it's happening in the public school system is wrong. Children are sitting down in their classrooms and they're being tasked with memorizing information and regurgitating whatever the teacher says back to them. And if they're able to regurgitate that information, they are giving praise, they are given grades, and their self-esteem is completely based on whether or not they agree with what the person in the lab coat, what the teacher had to say. And what are the ramifications of that? What are the ramifications of teaching our children that truth comes from authority? That knowing comes from memorizing. What are the ramifications of that? Well, I would argue over the last couple of years, we've seen the ramifications of that. We saw a rollout in March of 2020 in which the lab coach said one thing, and there was a segment of the population completely and utterly incapable of questioning their doctrine. Whereas the beautiful scientific method had been transformed through some type of indoctrination-style metamorphosis into the God, capital S, religion of science. Well, that ends today. Because we as homeschool parents have the capability of getting back to the roots, the beauty of science, the observing, the testing, the formulating of hypotheses, the setting up of controls, the identifying of independent and dependent variables. Using your critical thinking faculties to say, wait a second, the science experiment did what I expected it to do, but did it have scientific validity? Did the experiment test for what I believed it tested for. Because if it didn't, you could throw that science experiment out the window. Science is a method, and it is just as important that we teach our children that method as we teach them the scientific principles and concepts behind whatever it is they're learning themselves. So let's talk about an experiment, and this is something you could all do. It's a very simple experiment, very easy to set up, very easy to do. But we've been learning a lot about waves. We learned about sound waves last week. We've been learning about light absorption. So I thought it would be a good time to teach the children about light refraction. And it's a very simple thing to teach them about. So all you need is a mason jar, some water, and a pencil. You take your mason jar. Really 2 mason jars, right? 2. So you take 2 mason jars, you fill one of them with water, and you put one of them to the side. And I'm going to go back and answer all your questions. I just like to get through my rants. Otherwise, I'll start fighting with trolls. So you take your 2 mason jars, you fill one with water, you leave one with air. The mason jar with air is going to serve as our scientific control. And you want to point out to your children that this is your control. This is the experiment we set up so we could compare. We have something to compare our other experiment to, right? We could compare, we could contrast, and we could isolate the variables, right? We can say, oh, I think this is the reason we got the results we got. So you need a control, and you want your children to understand that. So you set up a mason jar, one with water, one with air. And first you take the pencil you take a pencil and you put it into the mason jar filled with air. And you have your child record their observations. What do you see? I see a pencil. Is there anything going on here? The pencil's in the jar. I see the pencil. All right, write down your observations. This was our scientific control. Now let's formulate a hypothesis. What do you think that pencil will look like if we put it in the mason jar filled with water? With water? I think... All right, let's read a little bit. And then you read a little bit about refraction. And what your children will read is that when light travels through mediums of air and water. But when it travels through something like water, it is slowed down by the water, and it could even bend. Right? It could bend the light. So, based on that information, what do you think will happen if we put this pencil in the mason jar? And they can formulate their hypothesis. Well, then you say, all right. So then what you do is you have them formulate their hypothesis, and from there, you have them take the pencil and put it into the mason jar, and then they record their observations, and what they'll see is that the pencil actually bends, right? Because the light, when it goes through the water, is slowed down by the water. It's more dense. It bends. And this is where rainbows come from. It bends, and boom, it appears that the pencil is bent. Right? It appears that the pencil is bent. So you have them record their observations, and then you sit down and say, okay, now what were our variables? What was our dependent variable? What were we measuring? We were measuring what happened to the pencil. Right, so the pencil was our dependent variable. Now, what was the independent variable? What was the variable that we changed to see what would happen? Well, first we put air in a jar, right? That was our control. And then what did we change about the second experiment? We put water in. You put water in. Your water is your what? Your independent variable, right? So now you've had your child identify the dependent variable, identify the independent variable. They've set up a scientific control. They did a basic experiment. They made a hypothesis. They recorded their observations. You have them analyze the results. Your child is learning as much about the scientific method as they're learning about light refraction itself. And then what you do is, at least what I would do and what I made graphics for, is then you spend the rest of the day looking into light and the different aspects of light and light refraction. So Next thing we did is we set up a graphic, and we basically set up a graphic of the mason jar, the water, the pencil, and we showed them the light went into the jar as a wave, and then when it tried to go through the water, it was tough. It was hard to run through water. Like when you're running at the beach and then you run into the water, it's tough all of a sudden to run. Well, it's tough for that light to get through the water, and it bent. And because the light bent, when it went into your eyes, it looked like the pencil had bent, right? You show them another graphic of light waves. You show them what light waves look like, and then you show them ocean waves. And you say light waves travel in a very similar fashion to the way waves travel through the ocean. Light waves are a form of energy. Ocean waves are a form of energy, right? And you know light waves are energy because you know that there are things in your life that you see that run on solar power, right? We have lights outside that aren't plugged into an outlet, right? They're outside, they're in the sun all day, getting charged by the sun by solar energy, solar power. And then at nighttime, when the sun goes down, the light bulbs actually produce light, right? So you are allowing them to relate, right? They have the experiment, and then they can relate it to what they see in the real world, right? And then you can go, you can take it as far as you want. What we did with the graphics is I had graphics on how a magnifying glass works. We had graphics on how a rainbow is produced, right? The sun rays come down, they hit the water in the sky. When the light goes through the water, it bends, just like in our mason jar, and that causes the prism of light that you see, right? So you're teaching them lesson after lesson. You could go over the light spectrum. We have a visual light spectrum, and you show them the colors of the rainbow. And then you could say, but did you know there's light that we don't see in the form of radio waves and gamma rays, infrared rays, X-rays? Lesson after lesson. I'm going to go back and answer some of your questions now. For anyone interested in what we do, you can find it at classicallearner.com, and our private homeschool community is Homeschools Connected. Thank you for what you are doing for our kids' future. Thank you for being here, and we're all doing it. And you know, I always say with Homeschools Connected, I literally, when people join Homeschools Connected, I inbox them, and the first thing I say is we are a community first. You know, if you have questions about curriculum, ask them. And Wednesday's Child is a human encyclopedia of every resource available in the history of the world for homeschool parents. And she's in the community, and ask her, and she'll let you know. So we're all doing it, and appreciate your support. What do I think of gravitational propulsion? What do you think of gravitational propulsion? It's such a blessing of a community. What do I think about gravity? So my view on gravity is slightly different than the mainstream or what most people would suspect. My view on gravity is that it's a theory, but I've never seen a scientific experiment that has shown me a measurement of gravity or has allowed me to observe gravity. Now, people would say, what do you mean? What do you mean you haven't observed gravity, right? You're not thinking. I know, you're probably triggered. What do I mean you haven't observed gravity? Well, don't you know that the apple fell from the tree, right? Newton was sitting under the tree, and the apple fell and it hit him in the head, and he was like, wait a second, things fall to the ground? Gravity. No one has ever thought of that in the history of humanity before that moment. That's a good story. It's a good story. I don't know if I believe the story. But no, obviously everyone knew before Newton pointed out that things fall down, right? So the question is, this gravity they're describing, what is it? The term gravity means is it's an effect, right? Gravity, they're describing an effect, right? They're saying that things fall down, and they're claiming that there's some force there, right? There's a claim that there's a force there. Well, are there any measurements for this force? Are there any scientific measurements for this force, this gravity, right? The answer is no. You'd be shocked that the answer is no, right? What do we do know, right? What do we do know about the way things go up and the way things go down? Yeah, of course the theory of relativity is unproven. These are all God science. They're not real science. And that will trigger some people, and they'll say, "Oh my God, how can you say that? You're so dumb." No, you're dumb. Like, I'm not the dumb one here. Actual science. What do we know about things that go up and things that go down? Well, we know that density and buoyancy cause things to go up and down. We know that magnetism, right, is a force that would, I guess, in similar be the way that gravity is described, right? Magnetism is an actual force that pulls on things. It pushes and pulls. So when I think about things going up and down, again, you don't have to know everything in this world. I know that density, buoyancy, and electromagnetism play a large role in why certain things go up and certain things go down, right? Gravity is just the description, at least the way most people think of it, is the description of an effect that most things fall to the ground, right? There's no measurement of gravity. I studied this probably for a month straight, gravity, asking all these people, can you send me one experiment for gravity, right? We're talking about scientific validity, right? It's calculated as acceleration. All right, but you're saying that there's this force making it accelerate. Okay, well, why isn't the force density, buoyancy, and electromagnetism, right? Yeah, Matthew and Ashley, you could be banned. Like, I don't care about your opinion. I don't think you have a valuable opinion. And I don't care what you think about my views on gravity. Neither do you. Okay. Well, Matthew and Ashley, DeMarco. If someone could please ban them. Actually, I'll mute you. I'll mute you for 5 minutes. You could be muted. So when you get into these scientific concepts, you have to cut through what is scientific theory, which is taught to children as scientific fact. Now, people will ask me, why do things go up and why do things fall? I don't know the answer. I just know that the explanation of gravity isn't accurate because there are no actual scientific ways to measure or observe gravity, right? I mean, you get into like, you get into a lot of this science and you're like, how do they know dark matter is there, right? Like, how do they observe dark matter? Like, oh, they don't. Well, how do you know it's there? And you know what their answer is? Because if it wasn't there, our theories would be incorrect. I was like, oh, so your theories they're treated like God science. And there's a lot of money behind these things and a lot of social status and a lot of power. And because of that, the powers that be, they teach these things as if they're facts when they know they're not. I agree we can't calculate gravity. Yeah, they haven't calculated it. They can't calculate it. They can't measure it, right? You know, they'll say like, why does a helium balloon go up, right? Like all things fall to the ground, right? No, all things don't fall to the ground. If you put helium in a balloon, does it fall to the ground? No, it doesn't fall to the ground, right? Helium in a balloon will go up. Well, the helium is less dense than air, right? That's why helium goes up, right? It's lighter than air. It's less dense than air. And that's why it goes up. But then you would say, well, what about gravity? Isn't gravity pulling it to the ground? Well, they say, oh, well, actually, it's, the difference in the density between the helium and air is enough to overcome the force of gravity. Is it? So, I mean, why could flies go up in the air, but raindrops go down, right? So when you start getting into their explanation of gravity, it's unproven, they can't measure it, and it's unproven, they can't measure it, and it's not logical. So then people say, oh my God, you don't believe in gravity, you're such an idiot. I was like, no, again, you're the idiot. Now, do I accept that there's a possibility that there is a force there? Sure, why not? But people think they have to know, right? They have to know, and they don't. Oh yeah, and how does a gravimeter work? Oh, there's an instrument. How does it work? That's like when they say light is a wave and a particle. And they say there's an instrument and it measures it, and that's how they know. I was like, okay, how can you get your hands on this instrument? It's like, oh, you can't. If you want to get your hands on this instrument, it costs $3 million. Okay. So your priests know that, right? I don't believe your priest, and I would believe your priest, but the problem is that your priests are caught lying all the time. Like, for example, just this month, one of the scientists got exposed. There's a very famous scientist who posted a picture of a planet, right? And what he got caught that the picture of the planet that he posted was actually a piece of salami, right? And he tried to pass this off as a scientific fact, right? And this is happening all the time, right? These people are caught lying all the time. So once they're caught lying all the time, you can't give me that, oh, well, they have instruments that no one else has, and because of that, they get to know and you don't, right? Now, could they be right? Right? They could be right. I don't know. But you have to prove to me, they're the ones making claims, right? My stance is, I don't fully know why certain things fall and certain things go up, certain things rise. I know that I personally am able to observe certain phenomenon, but like you're saying that there's this invisible force there and it's pulling things down and pulling things up, right? And you'll say, oh, but we know that because a man walked on the moon. How do you explain that? A man never walked on the moon, right? You think a man walked on the moon and you'll tell me I'm dumb. It takes about 5 minutes of research to figure out that a man never walked on the moon. Yeah, I mean, gravity is this weak universal force. So it's pulling raindrops down to the ground, but it's strong enough to stop the oceans from flying off the earth. There's nothing consistent about their claims of gravity. Yeah, there is no measurement. They've never measured gravity. Go read an elementary school science book. Do you want to go over the history of how they took over textbooks, genius? Do you know in the 1950s there was this Reese committee, and there was this guy Norman Dodd. He was a congressional investigator, and he got access to the corporate minutes of the Carnegie Institute, the Rockefeller Institute, these big foundations, the Ford Foundation. And what he found is that these foundations had got together and they wanted to get America into World War I. And then after World War I, These foundations wanted to make sure that America never again got back to an anti-war mindset. And this is all congressionally documented. And so what they did is they wanted to get America back to an anti-war mindset. So what they did was they gave out $400,000 in college grants to, it was the Carnegie Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Guggenheim Foundation. And they gave out these $400,000 of college grants to 20 hand-picked college students, and they flew them across the ocean, across the Atlantic Ocean to London, England, where they had this meeting with them, and they gave them these grants and paid for their college. $400,000 in the 1930s, a tremendous amount of money. Well, fast forward 10 years, and those 10 students made up the governing board of the American Historical Association. And do you know what the American Historical Association does, and especially did in that time? They determined the best practices for how history teachers were to be educated and for what went into history textbooks. They used their money to take over the textbooks. Now, you might say, oh, but Brett, you idiot, that's history. Okay, do you want to know how they did it with science? It's a modus operatus. It's an MO. It's how they operate. So in 1910, there was this report. It was called the Flexner Report. Right? It was the Flexner Report. And it was funded by Carnegie, Rockefeller, and the American Medical Association. You're seeing a trend here. American Historical Association, the American Medical Association. And this report basically said that all medicine that wasn't pill-based, wasn't backed by science, your God science, and it was complete garbage and quackery. Well, after the report was published, they used it to get legislation passed. And that legislation gave the American Medical Association control over how future doctors would be educated and what medical schools would receive or have their accreditation pulled. Well, within 20 years, there were half the number of medical schools in the United States of America, because all of the medical schools that didn't say that pill-based medicine was the way had their accreditation ripped, and they were shut down. Their funding was taken away. And then all of the doctors were taught that allopathic medicine, pill-based medicine, is the only way. And then you see how many so-called educated doctors there are after March of 2020 who don't know the first thing about how the world actually functions and medicine. It's a modus operatus. So when you tell me to go back to elementary school and read a science textbook, I would tell you that the reason that you don't understand, the reason you're having a difficult time keeping up with what I'm saying is because you read those science textbooks and your teacher said, oh, little Za, you're so smart. And then you got older and your mom told you that you were a special boy. You're a special boy. And you go on the internet and you go, but as it turns out, Za, you're not as smart as you think you are. Now me, you say, oh, so Brett, you're so smart. No, I don't claim to know everything. Like you say, well, Brett, well, why do things fall to the ground? I don't know. I suspect density, buoyancy, and magnetism have something to do with it, right? Right? And I don't rule out, like, your gravitational force could be real. Like, I'll teach my children the theory of gravity. Absolutely. Why wouldn't I teach them that? It's a theory. But I'll teach them it's a theory, not a law. And there's a difference. And then they could spend their lives figuring that out. Yeah, of course a man didn't walk on the moon. It's preposterous. They can't even get through the Van Allen belt. You would need, I think, like something ridiculous, like 7 feet of lead to get through the Van Allen belt without the people inside being fried by gamma radiation. Have I taken the thing? No, I'm not. I wasn't dropped as a child. Well, obviously I haven't. Because while Za was like, oh, don't you know, I was accurately calling out everything that happened in the world for the last few years. Like to a T. Oh my, a conspiracy theory isn't facts. Since you like authorities, I am a history major. I have a bachelor's degree in history, and because of that, I'm very good at getting back to primary documents. And these conspiracy theories, they aren't theories, they're historically documented facts. In fact, I've gone back and read the primary documents myself. By the way, I teach a course on the medical industrial complex for members of Homeschools Connected. It's a full unit study, and the children are actually prompted to read the Flexner report. And in the Flexner report, there's this crazy thing when you actually go back and like read scientific studies and read reports and whatnot. It says there's right on the report, right on like the introduction, it says this was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, in accordance with the American Medical Association. Right there on the report. Right there. And if you go to the American Medical Association's website, it brags about the report. Right there on the website. There's like this website. It's called the AMA. You know, their website. Their official website. And it brags about this history on said website. Conspiracy theory. I'm making printables for homeschooling. That's awesome. What's my level of education? Thanks for asking. I have a bachelor's degree in history education. I have a master's degree in special education. I graduated from my master's program with a 4.0 GPA. I was given the award for the number one student in the entire program. I started my own company. I run a successful business. I published not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, but 7 books. I'm an Amazon. I am an Amazon. I'm an Amazon number one best-selling author, and I've written 9 books. I just haven't published. No. Yes, 9 books, and I'm writing a 10th. I've just only published 7 of them. How do you keep your child socially normal? By not being around other students every day. Well, what you have to do is make it a priority. So what you could do is, and what I would suggest is you set up play dates once or twice a week. You go to the park once or twice a week. For my son, in terms of like programs he's in a church group every Sunday with, 50 other children, which he really loves. He's in jujitsu class every Wednesday with a bunch of children. I think there's 30 kids in that class. He is in a gymnastics class every Friday, and there are, I don't know, probably about another 40, 50 kids in that class. It's not baseball season right now, but during baseball season, which is in the spring and the fall, just not the summer because it's too hot around here, he has his baseball team. So it's really not hard to get, really not hard to get social exposure. All right, Trump or prison? Trump for prison. You're clearly not a smart person. Like you're like conspiracy nut. Anyone who doesn't consider themselves a conspiracy theorist isn't intelligent. Like, you don't think that. Now, we could disagree as to what conspiracies are correct. Yeah, sure. Like, I'm sure I get some wrong. Like, no doubt. But you don't think that rich and powerful people conspire to get more money and power, what do you think politics are? How dense do you have to be? I mean, if we put you in water, you'd sink right to the bottom. Not because of gravity. Yeah, see, like now you're getting it, Trump for prison. You're saying that Elvis was taken by aliens. Now, I don't agree with that, but at least you're thinking, right? At least you're thinking. I don't think he was taken by aliens. But, for instance, in a couple of years, if the powers that be decide to fake one of those invasions, I'll be pointing out that it's fake, and you'll probably be in your house crying, begging, begging the powers that be to protect you, and you'll give away all your rights, right? As I'm guessing you were doing after March of 2020, right? I'm guessing people like you were the type of people that would yell at me when I went into a store because I wouldn't cover my face, right? Right? You're one of those people because you were so afraid. No one here is impressed with you. Go away. Usually I would just ban these people, but I figured I'm just going to go at them today and then I'll ban them tomorrow. There are recordings and videos of astronauts admitting they didn't go to the moon. Yeah, and there's astronauts, you're right, there's Russian astronauts, Polish astronauts, have all admitted this stuff. Buzz Aldrin openly admitted that the moon tapes were fake, which like is hilarious that more people don't talk about. He openly admitted it like a year ago. I mean, for years before that, I was saying, those tapes are obviously fake. And then the astronaut who was there admitted it, right? But to people like Za, like, they don't ever acknowledge stuff because they're not actually capable of thinking. People like me threaten their existence because if what I'm saying is true, everything about their worldview crumbles because then everything the guy who wants to give you an ouchie says might not be true and, they might not have made a good decision the last few years. Yeah, libraries, sports, clubs, but you do have to make sure you get your children into the world, but that's, you have to make that a priority. Right, Tuskegee, right? You go do you. This is my first year homeschooling. I love what you're doing. Congratulations. And it's such a great decision. And what I always tell new homeschoolers is don't feel pressure to replicate public school. Like, it's the point not to. Like, you don't have to do 45-minute blocks from 8 a.m. to 3. Like, that's crazy. Start with baby steps. It's like climbing a mountain. You do step by step and you build on what you're doing. You always have the flexibility to follow the interest of your children, to go at the pace of your child. And if you have any questions, you're in the right place. So, homeschool ladder to McDonald's. Well, first of all, why would you be in a homeschool chat if you don't homeschool? Go away. No one likes you. You're the worst kind of people. You probably lived the last few years of your life in complete fear. Right? You probably believe everything the media says. That's like pathetic. Like, you're not impressing anyone. And yeah, actually, homeschool students perform statistically better on the SATs, on all standardized testing, and they are more entrepreneurial. So, again, the statistics, don't let them hit you on the butt on the way out of this chat. And yes, of course, homeschool children are not isolated. I mean, they can be if you do it wrong, but most homeschool parents have their children out in the world. Yeah, I mean, if you read the book Behold the Pale Horse, it's a pretty powerful read on the whole alien thing that Za's going to believe is true in 2 years. This guy is so triggered. He's a gamma male. he can't handle a man telling him he's wrong about things. Like, oh my God, but my mom said. Right, yeah. Yeah, because they haven't been to the moon. Let's see. They went to the moon, but then they say they lost the original moon tapes before eventually admitting that the tapes were fake. So for the longest time, they said, oh, we lost the tapes. We accidentally taped over them, so we don't have the originals. And then they admitted they were fake, right? Then they lost the telemetry data, which is the mathematical data of how they got there and all of the measurements they took. Yeah, because you just lose that telemetry data, right? You lose the original tapes, you lose the telemetry data. They haven't been back there since 1971 because, yeah, everything we know about human exploration is if you go to a new place and now you know how to get there, you just stop going there for 50 years. But every 5 years, oh yeah, we're going back in 5 years. We're going back in 5 years, right? It's so apparently obvious that they faked it. It's like, I mean, people have no discernment at all. Prove to me they did go. Oh, and then you have the leading NASA, I guess his exact role, but the head guy in NASA saying that they would go back to the moon in a nanosecond if they had the technology, but they lost it, and it's just too painful to rebuild. Because everything we know about technology says that you actually lose technology from 1970 to 2022, right? Because in the area of open heart surgery, right? There were surgeries they could do in 1950, but, they just don't have the technology now, so they can't save your life, right? Or you could believe that they made a live phone call from the moon to the President of the United States in 1969. It doesn't take much discernment to figure out they didn't go to the moon. This stuff is obvious. Not to mention that they couldn't get through the Van Allen belt. They would need something like 7 feet of lead to stop the astronauts on board from getting fried. How do they keep the batteries cool? Apparently the moon is 200 degrees at night and then 200 degrees hot during the day and then negative 200 degrees at nighttime. How did they keep the batteries cool or from overheating or themselves from overheating or from freezing to death? Of course they never went to the moon. You probably believe Elon Musk is on Mars too. I saw that interview, where NASA said they couldn't get back to the moon. Jaw-dropping, right? This stuff isn't rocket science. Pun intended. Do you have recommendations for different monthly subscriptions for kids, like STEM activities? I mean, my son, we use the KiwiCo science box. KiwiCo is a really good company. They deliver science experiments to your house once a month. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Homeschools Connected, we do weekly science experiments in which your children are actually setting up scientific controls, identifying the independent and dependent variables. They're making hypotheses, observing, recording their observations, analyzing the results. It's really powerful stuff. And we do that each week with science. We do weekly STEM activities, all types of stuff, construction projects. And that's Homeschools Connected at classicallearner.com. With the discount code FREEDOM, it's $10 a month. Do you believe in aliens? I would think that there are probably other beings, whether you want to call them aliens or demons or angels, I would think so. I don't know that. I've read CIA disclosures on that type of stuff, but it's hard to tell what they disclose in terms of being psychological operations and what they disclose in terms of they're actually letting you know. Do Do I think they're flying here from other worlds? And, I don't think so. I don't think the way it's presented. But it's possible. So, my official answer to that is I don't know. I have friends that are like pretty high ranking people in like the military and stuff. Um, and I do have good reason to believe that the government has attempted to reverse engineer technology that maybe isn't natural from this world. But again, for me to actually know that, I have no idea. I'm like an interesting person and I do interesting things. And when you do interesting things, you start to make friends with interesting people. And there must be some validity to some of this stuff. But for me to discern what is what, I have no idea. I have no idea. Woo! Melissa the Troll Slayer is here. I just realized I don't have to be like the school my pre-K child is doing. It's much better now. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you don't have to do hours of formal schooling a day. Like, you don't. And 2 hours a day of formal schooling is plenty. And then the rest of the day you could do more observing the world and less formal things, cooking, fun music time. Like, there's so much you can do that's not formal. Go to museums. We just wanted to be better than Russia. Yeah, I think that originated with the space race and trying to. It's kind of like if you read the book of Art of War by Sun Tzu, right? Like in the Art of War, the basic argument behind the military strategy is that you want your enemy to believe you're really strong where you're weak, so that they're afraid to attack you where you're weak. And then you want them to think you're weak where you're strong, so that they accidentally attack your strength and then you annihilate them. That's Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Well, if you think about the Cold War, you had America and Russia trying to project strength not only to each other, but to the rest of the world. And I think that was I think when Kennedy said we're going to the moon, he probably could. He probably, he was probably pumped about that. He was like, we're going to the moon. And then a few years went by and they're like, well, we're not going to the moon. And they were like, all right, well, what could we do? We could project strength and just tell the world we did. And that's what they did. And that's why they haven't been back since, quote unquote, since 1971, because they never went there in the first place. They just wanted to create the illusion, right? They wanted to create the illusion that they had that type of tech, that they had that type of capability. But the truth is, if they could get to the moon, they would probably have laser-guided nuclear missiles on the moon, right? Why wouldn't they have that? People are, oh, what, Dr. Evil? Why wouldn't they have that? Because they can't. They can't get there. And they haven't been to Mars. They've never left low Earth orbit because they can't get through the Van Allen belt. Obama slipped one time. He didn't realize he was talking in a different context. He wasn't talking about the moon landing, and he was talking about space, and he was like, yeah, we're just trying to figure out how to get through the Van Allen belt. He slipped. He didn't realize he wasn't supposed to say that. And people that paid attention were like, you guys said we've been through the Van Allen belt many times. No one asked Obama that, but he slipped. He messed up. He was in his briefings. What are we doing? And they said, we still haven't figured out how to get through the Van Allen belt. And so he was doing an interview, and he was like, yeah, if we figure out how to get through the Van Allen belt. Come again, Barack? I love your books. Thank you very much. Click Cubs to Bears. Oh, yeah. I mean, the times that NASA have been caught using, they used a lot of what they do is filmed in pools. And they admit this, by the way. A lot of what NASA does is filmed in pools, and it's green screen technology in the pool, and it gives the illusion that they're floating, except one of the mistakes they make is a lot of times in their videos, you could actually see air bubbles going up in front of the astronauts. These are air bubbles in the pools. Another thing they do is they use green screens on suspension wires, but if you look closely at some of their videos, you could actually see the tug on their shirt and the astronauts getting pulled by suspension wires. And then another tactic they have is they're called zero gravity planes. They're really cool. Basically these planes go up in the air and they basically kind of like drop out of the sky. And as the planes drop out of the sky, it actually creates an effect where the people in the planes could it looks like they're floating. It looks like the way as gravity is described. And they use all of this. These are all parlor tricks. They're illusions. And, people want to know why they do this. Well, NASA gets $57 million a day. $57 million a day. $57 million a day. Right? And then, why do they do all this stuff? And, the illusion of power, the making people feel insignificant, separating them from their creator, separating them from God, that, you are just an insignificant speck flying through infinite nothing, right? When Albert Pike wrote Rules for Dogma, 33rd degree Freemason many years ago, in the 1800s, he laid out a plan. And in that plan, he talked about how they would start World War I and World War II and World War III eventually he got into. And he also said that they would create a one-world religion. And people look at that and are like, oh, did they ditch that plan to create a one-world religion? No, they didn't ditch the plan. NASA's the religion. That's the religion they created. It's scientism. It's science with a capital S. And they created this one-world religion of scientism, and that's how they're conquering the world, right? And they're doing it through climate science. They're doing it through what we saw from March of 2020. That's the religion. That's why people can't question the priests in the lab coats. Right, they use a fisheye lens to make it, yeah, they do all this stuff. You're not getting it. Constructing a giant laser on the moon would be a giant waste of money. Do you think it would be a giant waste of money for these countries that are at war with each other constantly to position weapons in a place where no one else could take out your weapon and you could take out everyone else? Do you think for 5 seconds, America has been at war for the last more than 20 years, but especially the last 20 years. Look at what's going on with the country in the Far East. Look at what's going on between America and the other country in the East. Yeah, careful naming these countries. The one with the Great Wall, right? You don't think it would be, I don't know, smart for the military budget and the $57 million a day they get from NASA to put weaponry, like laser weaponry on the moon that could not be taken out by your enemy and could take out all your enemies? They would do that in a nanosecond, as NASA said, if they could. And anyone who can't see that is just, you don't want to see that. That's so obvious. It's so obvious, it's laughable. Not to mention, you don't think there would be, I don't know, commercial opportunities on the moon? You think like an Earth diamond is worth a lot of money? How much money do you think it's worth to have a monopoly over moon rocks? We're the only ones that sell moon rocks. Diamonds are forever. Moon rocks last an eternity. Do you know how much money would be in that? You don't think there's corporate interest that would be there? Have you thought this through for 10 seconds? Yeah, I know. And people think we went to Mars. It's so laughable. They've never been anywhere near Mars. Ever. Not even close. You're not understanding zero gravity planes. The plane is dropping out of the sky. It's a plane maneuver. And yes, they have tech to make planes on Earth. They don't have the tech to leave the Van Allen belt. They can't get through it. They are trapped. Why? All right, seems like we could go to the moon with that technology. Why haven't they been there since allegedly 1971? Because they can't. They even said we would go back to the moon in a nanosecond. We just don't have the technology. We destroyed it, and it's too painful to rebuild. If you believe that, I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. Have you ever heard of any other piece of technology regressing from 1971? In 1970, they could do it, but now they can't. Technology's got good enough. And by the way, it's their bragging which gives away their lies, because they also have said, when we went to the moon in 1969, we had less technology than you have in your cell phone now. Oh yeah, but it's too painful to rebuild? You just can't get back there? No, what they do, and you'll go back and look at it, what they do is every 5 years, they say, 5 years from now, we're going to launch a new moon mission. And then the 5 years passes, they make an excuse. They just did this again. They just reset it. They make an excuse and say, oh, we couldn't get there. We're going to have to set this goal for 5 more years. They're extracting money and they're extracting belief from you. And that's the way the world functions. And, I don't care. Like, people who can't see it, they don't want to see it. They have major cognitive dissonance, and it's fine. Think what you want. I don't not like you because you think we went to the moon. We just never went to the moon. Do you believe there's a man on the moon? Oh, right, yeah. Do you know the American government I forgot which country it was, gave another country a moon rock as a present? And anyway, they wound up doing testing on the moon rock, and they found out that it wasn't a moon rock, that it was petrified wood from Earth. It's because they don't have moon rocks. Fun fact, we launch on the 2nd and we're going back to the moon. Check back in on the 2nd when they don't go back to the moon. There's no reflectors on the moon. And I know you think that, but I actually know real people in the real world with real telescopes that can get very close looks at the moon. They have studied it. I am friends with people. I just did an interview on Crow 777 Radio. Crow 777 Radio shot a documentary called Shoot the Moon. And for literally 10 straight years, he watched every single night. He not only watched, but filmed the moon with a very high resolution telescope for 10 straight years. He filmed a documentary on it, and there is nothing visible, man-made, on the moon. If you think that, you're wrong. They didn't leave reflectors because they never went there. And you can't find the reflectors because they're not there. Hello, smile. You're not intelligent. You're like, ha ha ha. Say ha ha again. You're banned. I dare you. I dare you. Say ha ha. Again, I know real people in the real world, not what NASA's telling you, who have done real extensive research and really studied the moon. You cannot find anything man-made on the moon. All right, so anyway, this went off the rails. I didn't feel like talking about moon science today, but it did, so whatever. It is what it is. I'm going to call it a day on that, and tomorrow, if Hello Smile and these people come back, I'm just going to block them because they're annoying. All right, so anyway, anyone interested in what I do, www.classicallearner.com, Homeschool's connected, use the discount code FREEDOM. It is $10 a month, and all lowercase. My favorite science vlogger is by far. If you want to know about the moon, go on to, I think, Vimeo, and watch a documentary called Shoot the Moon by Crow777 Radio. I did a interview with him. Well, I had an interview with him aired yesterday. The guy knows more about the moon than anyone you've ever met. All right, I'll be back tomorrow. The moon people are annoying me. I'm going to talk about topics that aren't the moon. This is why I don't talk about this. All these people annoy me. I get annoyed. It probably shows.